Johnny Talk Sports in with the Week 8 college football predictions. And what a Week 7 we had this past Saturday. I didn't really think we would see that much last week because we had a big week the week before that. Matchups didn't really look the best, but despite all that, we had Purdue upset number 2 Iowa. We had Tennessee fans just show complete classless behavior, throwing out debris on the field with 51 seconds left after the officials ruled that they were just short on a fourth down conversion play. And the thing is, Tennessee had the chance to get the ball back as they had all 3 timeouts. In fact, they did get the ball back, and they were just inches away from pulling off that upset. What are we in store for in Week 8? Well, kind of like this week. The matchups, they don't look the best on paper, but I still think we have the potential of having another good college football Saturday. But before I get to the Week 8 predictions, it's time for my new top 10. Georgia remains at number 1. They continue to show that they are the most dominant and most consistent team in college football this season. At number 2, I have Penn State. Despite the one loss to Iowa, it's a loss that would not have happened if Sean Clifford never had to leave the game, because Sean Clifford was leading his offense, moving the ball at will on that Iowa defense. And I think that this week's performance that Iowa had against Purdue, I think it shows that Penn State, they would have not lost to Iowa if Sean Clifford stayed in the game the entire time. Number 3, Cincinnati. I'm interested to see how the committee would be ranking Cincinnati. When we get committee rankings in a couple weeks, I'm interested to see where they are going to put Cincinnati. Because if you look at who's behind Cincinnati, you've got the Big Ten, essentially. You've got Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, and Penn State. They're all going to still play each other. So that's going to be interesting to see within the next few weeks, as we're going to see that take place. Number 4, I have Michigan. Number 5, I have Oklahoma. I have been waiting to see Oklahoma play like a top 10 team. And as I said last week, I think with Caleb Williams at quarterback for the Sooners, I think they do indeed look like a top 10 team. In fact, we finally saw Oklahoma have a dominant performance in all 60 minutes of the game. Against Texas, it was only a second half dominant performance. Are we possibly seeing Oklahoma's offense finally starting to click? Kind of like Ohio State's offense. We're finally starting to see them click as well. Number 6, I have Michigan State. Number 7, I have Oregon. And Oregon's last 2 games, they haven't been playing that well. I mean, they almost lost to Cal. They played Cal really close. So I'm a bit worried about Oregon moving forward. In fact, they're the top 10 team that I'm worried about the most in this second half of the college football season. At number 8, I have Oklahoma State. Number 9, I have Alabama. And at number 10, rounding out my top 10, I have Ohio State. So that is my top 10 after the Week 7 games. And we are officially halfway through the 2021 college football season. And these rankings are going to continue to change week after week. I feel like maybe they might not change as much this week, but in the coming weeks, they definitely will, because as mentioned, we've got Penn State, Michigan, Michigan State, and Ohio State. They're still going to play each other. They still have to. And it's going to be interesting to see who comes out on top amongst those 4 teams. Because whoever comes out of the Big Ten East, based off of the way that we've seen the Big Ten West teams play, whoever wins that is going to be in prime position for the college football playoff, assuming that whoever comes out of it only has one loss. So without further ado, let's get to the Week 8 college football predictions. First game on tap this week, Coastal Carolina and Appalachian State. This is a Wednesday night game, and this does feel like a mismatch here. Appalachian State, they are averaging about 31 points per game, which is towards the top 30 in the FBS. Chase Bryce is looking to bounce back after 133 yards and 2 interceptions last week in the loss to Louisiana. And here is where I think the mismatch is going to come in. Going up against Coastal Carolina. I mean, the Chanticleers have won 18 out of their last 19 games, which is besides the point. They are the best in the FBS in third down conversions, converting about 62% of their third downs. They have the best scoring offense in the FBS, scoring an average of 48.8 points per game. They have the second best total offense in the FBS, only behind Ohio State. They are 6th in total defense, and they are 7th in scoring defense. Grayson McCall is playing really well so far, 14 touchdown passes to only 1 interception. And they also have 3 different running backs that are averaging at least 7 yards per carry. So there is no doubt in my mind that Coastal Carolina wins this game. Can Appalachian State keep up with the Chanticleers? Maybe they could. But I just think this Coastal Carolina defense, I think that we don't talk about Coastal Carolina that much because of the schedule they play. But you don't win 18 out of 19 games by no accident. And they would have been in a New Year's Six game last year if it hadn't been for Cincinnati. And that's going to be the same case for them again this season, because I can't see Cincinnati falling down the rankings if they lose a game. So I think Coastal Carolina, they win this in dominant fashion. Another dominant performance by the Chanticleers. I think they're going to win big. Next game is Nevada and Fresno State. And this may not seem like the most exciting matchup of the week. It may not seem like the most exciting matchup, period. But there is still something good that you can get out of this matchup, and that is the quarterback play. Carson Strong for Nevada, 2,004 passing yards this season so far, which is 8th in the FBS. And you have Jake Haener for Fresno State, 2,326 passing yards, which is 3rd in the FBS. Now, this matchup, without a doubt, there's going to be a lot of passing in this game. There's going to be a lot of scoring in this game. However, I just got to go with what I think is the better choice all around. I'm going with, based off what I've seen this season, kind of like how I picked NC State and Boston College last week. I was more impressed with what I saw out of NC State than Boston College. And this is the same thing here with Fresno State. I am more impressed with what I've seen from Fresno State this season than what I have Nevada. Now, I know Fresno State, they played UNLV pretty close, and they lost to Hawaii. But you just got to look at what they have accomplished so far this season. They had a current top 10 team in Oregon on the ropes in week 1. The week before, Oregon went on the road to Columbus and took down Ohio State. These Fresno State Bulldogs had Oregon on the ropes. And they had a come-from-behind win against UCLA a few weeks later. So with that in mind, with me being more impressed with Fresno State this season so far than I am Nevada, I am going with the Bulldogs. Plus, Fresno State has been doing better defensively so far this season than Nevada. Fresno State, 11th in total offense, and Nevada being 63rd in total defense. Fresno State being 22nd in total defense, and with Fresno being 23rd in scoring defense. This does feel like a mismatch, but I don't think it is. I think there's going to be a shootout, but I just think in the end it's going to favor Fresno State. Next, we have USC and Notre Dame, and this matchup does not have the hype that it does now, as it would have in the preseason. In fact, if you would have sat down with me in late July, early August, and you went through all the games, week by week, all the matchups, and once you got to USC and Notre Dame, I would have told you that this would be the game of the week. And ultimately, back in the preseason, this matchup would have been the game of the week. Both these teams, they were in the top 15. In fact, if this matchup would have gotten played in week 1, it would have been like a top 20 matchup. But both these teams, they haven't been playing to their standards so far this season. In fact, for USC, it got to a point where they fired Clay Helton after the week 2 loss against Stanford. And for Notre Dame, well, they probably could have lost either of their first 2 games, if not lost them both. And they were struggling against Wisconsin. They were in a dogfight with Wisconsin, who has been disappointing this season, until the kick return in the fourth quarter that changed the tide of that game. Their one loss of the year is to Cincinnati, who is ranked number 2 in the country, or at least the AP suggests so. Now, I'm picking this game based off of what I've been more impressed with this season. Because to be honest, I haven't really been impressed with either of these 2 teams. But I am going to go with Notre Dame because Notre Dame, they really still have something to fight for, still something to play for. Even if they can't get to the playoff, which honestly, with Notre Dame having 1 loss, probably playoff ineligible at this point, but that's another conversation for another day. Still, a potential New Year's 6 berth on the line for Notre Dame. I think if Notre Dame wins out, they're at least getting a New Year's 6 game. So I'm going to pick Notre Dame in this one. Really no particular reason. I just haven't been impressed with USC at all this season. So I'm going with the Irish. Next, we have LSU and Ole Miss, an SEC West showdown. And shocking news out of Baton Rouge over the weekend, as it was reported that Ed Orgeron will be out as the LSU head coach at the end of the 2021 season. And this is kind of shocking that it's coming out now, especially after LSU just pulled off the upset over a top 20 team in Florida. But it was also reported that it was in the works before LSU even took the field against Florida last week. So it does beg the question, does LSU have a home run hire in mind? That can be another conversation for another day. But Ole Miss, they are 3rd in total offense this season. However, Matt Corral's status is in question. And if Matt Corral isn't going to be in this game for the Rebels, then I think they're in trouble. Because you can just say that Ole Miss can rely on the running game, but Matt Corral is also the team's leading rusher. So if Matt Corral can't play in this game, I think LSU pulls off another upset. But if I had to guess, I think Matt Corral is going to play in this game. Because Ole Miss can't afford to play this game without Matt Corral. Especially when this is a program that has a lot on the line right now. Well, both teams have a lot on the line at this point. For Ed Orgeron, this is going to be a resume builder for him. Because, yes, he is going to be let go at the end of the 2021 season. But there might be a team that is also going to part ways with their head coach at the end of the year. And it could really be an audition. It can show that, Ed Orgeron has won a national championship. And I think there's going to be some teams that are going to want Ed Orgeron. So if he can pull off another upset, it's going to boost his resume for other teams. Now, Ole Miss is 5th in scoring offense. Now, how can LSU win this game? Well, it's by running the football, because Ole Miss is 109th in the FBS in run defense. And Davis Price just had 287 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns last week in the upset win against Florida. And their run defense only allowed 139 rushing yards against a run-heavy team in Florida last week. Florida's 5th in the FBS in rushing offense, while Ole Miss, they're 4th in rushing offense. So if LSU can eliminate the Ole Miss run game, I think there's a chance that the Tigers can pull off yet another upset. But as I said just a moment ago, if Matt Corral plays in this game, I think Ole Miss will. Well, I'll say this, though. If Matt Corral plays in the game on Saturday, Ole Miss will win by maybe at least 2 touchdowns. But if Matt Corral is out, then I think LSU pulls off the upset. So my pick in this game is going to be whether or not Matt Corral plays. But I think there's about maybe a 90% chance that Matt Corral will play. I just think there's too much on the line for Ole Miss right now to have Matt Corral not play in this. So I think Ole Miss picks up the win. But if not, LSU pulls off the upset if Corral doesn't play. Next, we have Clemson and Pittsburgh. What is happening with Clemson's offense? 115th in total offense this season and 114th in scoring offense, which is un-Clemson-like. Even though you lost Trevor Lawrence and you lost Travis Etienne, there was still quite a bit of talent on that Clemson roster. I mean, DJ Uiagalelei had a lot of hype coming into the season, and he has struggled all year long. However, Clemson still continues to have one of the best defenses in college football. 2nd scoring defense, only behind Georgia. And they're 24th in total defense. But unfortunately, having a good defense, it can only carry you so far. Just ask Iowa. While for Pittsburgh, they're 5th in the FBS in total offense, and they are 3rd in scoring offense. And Kenny Pickett this season, 21 touchdown passes so far to only 1 interception. And if it weren't for that one loss to Western Michigan, we could be talking about Pittsburgh being a dark horse for the playoff. But with the one loss to Western Michigan, even if Pittsburgh wins out, they win the ACC, I doubt that they would be in the playoff unless the most chaotic season of college football were to take place in the second half of the year. And I'm talking 2007 on steroids. But I still think that Pittsburgh will ultimately win this game because Clemson, even though they have a good defense, their defense has been carrying them throughout the majority of the season. And again, having a good defense, it can only take you so far. And Kenny Pickett is, with him playing really well so far this season, and his draft stock is going up, I think Pittsburgh wins this game. And I'd say, honestly, with the way Clemson has played this season so far, I think Pittsburgh might win this game quite handily. Because we've yet to see Clemson's offense really get to the form that we're used to seeing. Next, we have Oklahoma State and Iowa State. And I'm looking forward to this matchup because of the running backs. Jaylen Warren and Breece Hall. These two have done phenomenal in their last 4 games. Jaylen Warren, 659 rushing yards in his last 4 games. Breece Hall, 610 rushing yards in his last 4 games. And for Oklahoma State, Spencer Sanders, 4 interceptions in his last 2 games. He has been inconsistent all season long. He's been struggling throughout the majority of the year. While Brock Purdy in his last 4 games, 9 touchdown passes to only 1 interception. And despite both these teams being in the Big 12, these two teams, they can play some defense. Oklahoma State is 19th in total defense, and Iowa State is 3rd in total defense. I think that this game is going to ultimately come down to which quarterback can rise to the occasion. Because these running backs are going to do their part. But I think if this game comes down to quarterback play, which I think it very easily might, because this could be one of those games where it comes down to who has the ball last. I think Iowa State pulls off the upset. Because Spencer Sanders hasn't been doing good recently, but Brock Purdy has. So I'm going with the hot hand in this matchup, and I'm taking Iowa State to pull off the upset. Finally, we have our game of the week, Oregon and UCLA. At least this is where College Game Day is going to be, and I can understand completely why they would choose this game as the game of the week, because UCLA, they have been in the top 25 at some point in the season. And the Pac-12, I think, it's more competitive this season than what we're used to seeing. But Oregon is ultimately the Pac-12's last hope as far as reaching the college football playoff. Cincinnati and their fans are ultimately going to root for UCLA to pull off this upset, as that would be another obstacle that Cincinnati would still need to be overcame for them to make the college football playoff. Because I will discuss later on in the week about Cincinnati's playoff hopes. But Oregon in their last 2 games, they have not been playing that well. They let Cal back into the game. They gave them a chance to send the game into overtime. And they could not kill the clock efficiently against Stanford, and they allowed Stanford to take them to overtime, and ultimately they lost in overtime. Well, for UCLA, their 2 losses on the year, pretty solid competition in Fresno State and Arizona State, as we saw Fresno State on opening weekend have Oregon on the ropes. And UCLA, Chip Kelly may have been on the hot seat coming into the year. In fact, I think that he was. And if looking at UCLA's remaining schedule after this, if they fail to win at least their final 3 or 4 games on the year, I could see Chip Kelly being out as the UCLA head coach. But he's going up against his old team in Oregon. For the Ducks, how efficient will their defense be against a UCLA team with an underrated quarterback? In fact, I've said this multiple times this season, the most underrated quarterback in college football in Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Because Oregon is a team right now that is decimated with injuries. In fact, in my opinion, their best offensive player, C.J. Verdell, out for the year, so Travis Dye has to step up for the Oregon running game. Looking at Oregon's remaining schedule, if there was a game that they were going to lose up until at least the Pac-12 championship game, this would be the game. Which is why I'm kind of concerned for Oregon going into this game, because this could potentially be a trap game for them. I think Oregon wins this game, but I think UCLA is going to make them work for it. In fact, I would not be surprised if UCLA pull off the upset. I think Oregon wins, but again, they're going to have their opponent play them really close. I think we're going to see another one of those games. So I think Oregon wins. I'm going to say 31-27. I think UCLA, they knock on the door as far as the upset is concerned, but the door is just going to get shut at the very end of the game. So those are my Week 8 college football predictions. Like, share, and subscribe. If there was a game that I did not predict on here that you would like me to predict, leave in the comment section and I will respond to you. Until next time, have a great day, and thank you for tuning in.